I sat at the long mahogany table in my parents' New Jersey dining room, trying to keep my expression neutral while the familiar parade of criticism began. My mother, Ella Lehner, held up a credit card statement with a sigh that carried years of judgment. Leah, 3 international trips this quarter. Honestly, how do you call yourself responsible with money? My father, Thomas, adjusted his gold Rolex and leaned back in his chair, voice firm but measured. And what about leaving that prestigious position at Morgan Stanley? You could have had a secure career path, a clear trajectory. Instead, you're running what, exactly, some consulting hobby. The table between us was littered with credit cards and monthly statements, evidence in their eyes of a reckless lifestyle I had carefully orchestrated to appear indulgent. They didn't see that my so-called extravagance was part of a much larger plan, and every hotel bill, every overseas flight had a purpose beyond what they could imagine. I sipped water, letting their words roll over me, maintaining a calm composure I had cultivated over years of similar dinners. Their worry and condescension contrasted sharply with my quiet confidence. I knew more than they ever suspected. Each complaint, each admonishment was a reminder of the role I had to play until the time was right. As they debated whether I was truly financially responsible, I checked my phone briefly, noting another message from my team, confirming preparations for the next step. I set the phone down and smiled politely at my mother, nodding as if her lecture mattered, all while thinking about the moves that were already in motion. The conversation shifted to my supposed lack of stability, and I prepared to navigate their concerns while keeping my plan on track. I shifted slightly in my seat, pretending to reach for my water glass while my fingers brushed against my phone, tucked discreetly in my lap. A new notification popped up, final acquisition documents ready for review. First national bank deal proceeding as scheduled. I glanced at it quickly, heart steady, and slid the phone back under the table, letting the tension of the moment mask my inner excitement. Mom droned on about budgeting and long-term stability, completely unaware that each of my so-called leisure trips had been meticulously planned client and acquisition meetings across Europe and Asia. Every 5-star hotel stay, every dinner with foreign investors had been a calculated move in the larger game. They only saw the glamour, never the strategy. Dad's gaze shifted toward me, scanning for any hint of indulgence or irresponsibility. I offered a polite nod as if I understood his concern, letting the conversation flow around me while my mind ran through the next steps, SEC filings, board notifications, and final confirmations from my team. Each task aligned perfectly with the timeline we had constructed months ago. Maya, my assistant, had sent another message an hour earlier, confirming the international divisions were ready to consolidate reports and initiate the formal announcement. I could feel the invisible threads of the empire I was weaving, stretching far beyond the suburban dining room. Yet neither parent had the faintest idea of how much power I already held. As Mom continued her lecture about financial prudence and career expectations, I kept my calm, internalizing their doubts and using them to sharpen my focus. I checked one last notification from my acquisition team, noting the timeline for the board meeting that would officially shift control. I put my phone away and smiled politely, letting my parents' voices wash over me, all while knowing the real game had already begun. Their discussion meandered to my supposed lack of experience, and I prepared to navigate their skepticism without revealing a single detail of the empire quietly forming at my fingertips. Mom's voice grew sharper, cutting through the polite hum of the dining room. Leah, we need proof that you're managing your finances responsibly. You can't just jet off to Europe for another conference without showing some stability. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing as if she could peer directly into my bank accounts. Dad added his own stern note, tapping the table with a finger adorned by a heavy gold ring. You left a high-paying position at Morgan Stanley. You could have climbed the ladder, earned real influence. Now, what exactly are you doing? Consulting some vague clients? How do we know you're not just throwing money around? I kept my expression calm, sipping my water slowly. Inside, I was reviewing acquisition milestones, noting which documents were ready for signature and which divisions were awaiting final confirmations. Every step had been anticipated, every outcome planned. My parents' skepticism floated around me like static, irritating but inconsequential. Mom reached for my credit card, her hand hovering as if she could physically wrestle responsibility from my grip. Until you demonstrate some real accountability, I'm restricting this. Her words hung in the air, heavy with authority. I smiled politely, letting her think she had some control. Even as my mind ran through the timing of the upcoming board notifications and SEC filings, I imagined how surprised they would be when the freeze they attempted would effectively only lock their own assets. My control over the bank and the credit systems meant every card they held, every account they thought was theirs, was already under my oversight. Their attempts to curb me were irrelevant in the grand scheme. Dad's lecture continued, layering warnings with financial advice, but I felt none of it pressing. I noted the next team update would confirm the final merger documents had cleared internal audit and that the European acquisitions were fully integrated. Each piece of the puzzle was falling into place while they insisted I needed to prove competence they assumed I lacked. As their voices merged into a single insistent drone, I shifted my attention briefly to my phone, watching another notification confirm the timeline for the official board meeting. I placed it back discreetly, folding my hands calmly as I nodded at my mother, allowing her to believe she was guiding the conversation while I silently orchestrated the next step of a plan they could never see coming. Their concerns lingered in the air as I prepared for the moment when their disbelief would meet undeniable proof, and the boardroom stage was set for the first act of the reveal. Mom slid her platinum card across the table toward me, voice firm. "Until you prove financial responsibility, this is being frozen." She glanced at Dad for support, and he nodded, tapping his gold Rolex impatiently. Their authority felt absolute in that moment. Yet, I couldn't help the small knowing smile that tugged at the corners of my lips. I kept my expression neutral, allowing them to feel the weight of their decision, even as I internally reviewed the chain of control I had quietly established. Every card, every account, every transaction they thought they could restrict was already under my oversight. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very tool they used to enforce discipline would be rendered meaningless by the system I had put in place. For a moment, I considered confronting them, revealing the depth of the plan I had executed over months. But patience had its own power, and I knew the timing of the reveal would multiply its impact. I let the card sit on the polished surface of the table as if it had any effect at all. Dad leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "You need to understand, Leia, that we're only trying to guide you. One wrong move, and it's your reputation at stake." I nodded politely, absorbing the lecture while my mind mapped to the upcoming board notifications, SEC filings, and final acquisition steps. Every move they tried to enforce, every rule they imagined they were setting, had already been anticipated and neutralized. As Mom drummed her fingers against the table, I allowed their concern to fill the room, letting them believe they held control. Behind the surface, I was calculating the exact moment when the illusion would shatter, when the cards they thought they had frozen would become the symbol of my authority, not theirs. With their lecture running its course, I glanced at my phone, noting the next confirmation from my team, and prepared to continue navigating their doubts. As the larger plan moved forward, I discreetly checked my phone again, barely reacting as another notification appeared. The final SEC filings for the first national bank acquisition had cleared, and the board had approved the integration schedule for the European and Asian divisions. At the same moment, a Forbes alert flashed: mystery buyer set to acquire major regional banking chain. My heart maintained a steady rhythm even as I imagined my parents' faces when they eventually understood the significance. Mom frowned, shaking her head as she glanced toward me. "A mystery buyer. I don't see how this relates to you. Leia, you're still just consulting clients, aren't you? This isn't your world." Dad's scowl deepened, adjusting his cufflinks as if the physical gesture could assert control over events he barely understood. I allowed a faint, polite smile, letting them perceive only the mildest hint of confidence. While my mind worked through the final operational checks, there had been a minor issue with the regional board's internal approval. They hesitated over a clause regarding subsidiary oversight, but Maya had already handled it, forwarding the confirmed sign-off. Everything was on schedule. The table conversation continued, Mom lecturing about financial prudence, Dad emphasizing the importance of predictable career moves. Every word they spoke reinforced the public perception they clung to, that I was still experimenting, still dabbling, still unproven. Meanwhile, the documents in my digital folder reflected billions in controlled assets, multiple acquisitions finalized, and an empire in motion. I noticed another Forbes notification, analysts speculating on the identity of the mystery buyer, hinting at an insider with unprecedented global reach. The suspense of public speculation only sharpened the contrast between my hidden reality and the parental narrative. I sipped my water and nodded politely at another parental comment about responsibility, masking the exhilaration that coursed beneath the surface. Their disbelief persisted, the notion of my consulting hobby carrying all the weight of triviality. I allowed it, knowing that the timing of revelation would maximize its impact. Each alert from my team, each confirmation of approvals, each cleared filing was a silent drumbeat in the unfolding symphony of control. I set my phone aside, letting the conversation drift around me, their concerns serving as a perfect backdrop. The acquisition's public hints were emerging, and soon enough, the first signs of recognition would ripple through the financial world. As I glanced at the clock, I noted the timeline for the next board notification, preparing for the moment when their perception of reality would finally collide with the truth. Mom's hand froze midair, platinum card hovering as if it had suddenly become heavy. "What? What is happening?" she asked, her voice tense, eyes darting between the screen of her tablet and mine. Dad leaned forward, his confident posture faltering as he scrolled frantically through notifications on his phone. The numbers and alerts seemed to shift beneath his gaze. And for the first time, his gold Rolex no longer felt like a symbol of control. I maintained my calm composure, keeping my hands folded in front of me. A small, polite smile curved my lips, hinting at nothing, suggesting only that I was attentive to the conversation. Inside, I tracked the progress of the acquisition in real time, subsidiaries integrating smoothly, final board approvals confirmed, SEC filings completed. Every element was in motion exactly as I had planned. Mom tried to regain control, tapping the tablet to refresh the account balances. Her credit card, the one she had insisted on freezing, displayed a locked message, but it wasn't locked in the way she imagined. The issuing authority was already under my oversight. She didn't yet comprehend that the move she thought would limit me only highlighted the extent of my reach. Dad's confidence wavered further, his jaw tightening as he realized that some of the alerts he received weren't errors, but confirmations. The corporate system now reflected my authority over accounts he assumed were untouchable. He opened his mouth, but the words faltered. I let the tension hang, nodding politely as if acknowledging their concern while silently guiding the next step of the plan. Every alert, every frozen account, every notification they stumbled over served to reinforce the gap between what they thought they controlled and the reality of my power. As Mom finally looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of alarm and disbelief, I returned my attention to my phone. Another notification confirmed the precise timing for the board meeting, signaling that the next phase of the acquisition was about to commence. Their doubts and fears would soon intersect with an undeniable reality, and the first act of the reveal was ready to unfold. I stepped into the First National Bank boardroom, the polished mahogany table stretching ahead, lined with familiar faces from the executive team and board members I had coordinated for months. Maya greeted me with a brief nod, signaling that everything was in order, from the integration reports to the finalized acquisition documents. The air felt taut, a quiet anticipation that mirrored the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. At the far end, I noticed my parents entering behind a senior board member. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Mom's eyes widened, and Dad's posture, usually so commanding, betrayed an unfamiliar uncertainty. I allowed myself the smallest smile, maintaining a composed front while internally preparing for the full reveal. As I took my seat at the head of the table, the final board notifications appeared on the screen behind me, all subsidiaries fully integrated, SEC filings confirmed, and control formally transferred. A brief hesitation flickered through my mind, an instinctive pause before executing the final steps that would fully assert my authority, but I pushed it aside. Timing and precision mattered more than any momentary doubt. I began the strategic presentation, outlining the vision for ethical banking, transparency, and sustainable growth. Charts and reports displayed on the screens behind me, highlighting projected efficiencies, global integration plans, and the steps already taken to secure the European and Asian divisions. Each point demonstrated not only mastery of the financial mechanics, but also a broader ethical framework that contrasted sharply with the rigid, self-interested practices my parents had long valued. Their disbelief intensified as I methodically explained the next phase of the merger, detailing capital allocations, board oversight, and operational restructuring. They had expected chaos, perhaps even amateur mismanagement. Instead, the reality before them was an impeccably orchestrated operation executed with precision. I watched them absorb the scope of the control I now held, the same people who had questioned every move, every decision, and every expenditure. The board members shifted, some exchanging glances, recognizing the authority I commanded. My presentation concluded, and I allowed a brief pause to let the impact settle, their astonishment palpable. With the documents finalized and control fully established, I prepared to transition to the next phase, reshaping the legacy of the bank and redefining what leadership would look like under my direction. I directed my team to begin implementing the compliance and ethical banking protocols we had meticulously designed. Each division received updated operational guidelines, risk assessments, and reporting procedures. Maya ensured that every department head understood their responsibilities under the new framework, emphasizing transparency and accountability at every level. My parents observed from the sidelines, their expressions a mix of surprise and tentative pride. Mom's fingers drummed nervously against the table as she watched the systematic rollout, while Dad's posture stiffened as he realized the authority he once assumed over operations was now subordinate to the procedures I had established. Old privileges, long taken for granted, were quietly removed, reserved executive parking spots, access to corporate credit accounts, and previously unchecked discretionary approvals were all restructured under the new compliance model. I maintained a measured tone, explaining the rationale behind each adjustment, making it clear that performance and adherence to policy, not tenure or family connections, determined standing within the organization. Despite the shift, I noticed subtle hints of acknowledgement from my parents. Mom's gaze lingered on the charts and reports, a grudging respect in her eyes, while Dad's tight jaw relaxed slightly as he witnessed the operational improvements in real time. Their struggle to accept the new hierarchy was palpable, yet their reactions hinted at the complex emotions of pride, disbelief, and adaptation. I walked through the room, reviewing implementation checkpoints and confirming that each department was aligned with the vision we had outlined. The transition was precise, efficient, and unmistakably under my control. With the legacy now reshaping under new ethical and operational standards, I prepared to address the wider world and the public recognition that would soon follow. By mid-morning, the headlines were unavoidable. CNBC reported the acquisition with graphics showing the full scope of control, highlighting the European and Asian subsidiaries that had been integrated under my oversight. The Wall Street Journal followed with an in-depth analysis of the strategic maneuvers that had enabled the consolidation, noting the ethical protocols and operational transparency that distinguished the merger from standard industry practice. I watched the coverage alongside my parents, who sat stiffly in the office lounge. Mom's hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes wide as she followed the screen, while Dad's usual composure cracked into lines of disbelief and frustration. They had expected me to stumble, to be exposed as inexperienced or overambitious. Instead, the evidence on the screens confirmed every projection, every move I had carefully orchestrated. Messages from colleagues and partners began streaming in, congratulating me on the smooth transition, the ethical framework, and the financial acumen evident in the public filings. I absorbed each note, noting which communications required immediate response and which could wait, all while maintaining a composed front for my parents, who were still reeling from the revelation. Their private reactions were more complex. Mom's pride was faint but tangible, threaded through with hesitation and a lingering sense of incredulity. Dad shifted in his seat, eyes flicking between the stock tickers and the board reports, processing the reality that the authority he once commanded was now firmly in my hands. As the media continued to highlight the global significance of the acquisitions, I felt the subtle satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly, each piece falling into place exactly as intended. The public recognition underscored the competence and strategy that my parents had long underestimated. With the coverage establishing the scope of my influence, I prepared to consolidate control further and guide the next steps of both operational and strategic management. With the acquisition complete and operational protocols firmly in place, I moved to consolidate control across First National Bank and my expanding financial network. Departments aligned under the new compliance standards. Subsidiaries reported transparently, and the international divisions responded smoothly to integration plans. Each step reinforced the structure I had carefully built, solidifying the empire I had quietly orchestrated. My parents, gradually absorbing the reality of the situation, began to adjust to their new roles. Mom's cautious pride showed in subtle comments about operational improvements, while Dad navigated his responsibilities with a new awareness of oversight and accountability. The lectures that had once defined our dinners shifted into a tentative dialogue, a minor reconciliation acknowledging competence they had underestimated. As I reviewed the final reports and confirmed that the board and international teams were aligned, I reflected on the months of preparation, the careful orchestration of each acquisition, and the patience required to let events unfold without revealing my hand prematurely. Their disbelief and skepticism had only sharpened the satisfaction of seeing strategy executed flawlessly. The empire was in place, the legacy reshaped, and the lessons clear. I closed my laptop and took a final glance at the city skyline, knowing that every underestimated move, every deliberate step had led to this moment where control, foresight, and careful planning defined success.